Следующий докладчик у нас Марі Жорж, эксперт Рады Европы. Доклад будет на английском языке, поэтому кому нужен синхронный перевод, пройдите, возьмите наушники, пожалуйста. Мари, прошу вас.
Yes, I am more or less specialized in data protection for so many years. The subject is always in actuality and is every day new, because the technologies maybe don't go in the right direction. Sometimes we think, oh, good, that's okay, we will be safe, and suddenly the morning after, we have a new technology which doesn't fit. Looking at the question you were just talking about traces. I see myself two kinds of traces, at least. One which are in the infrastructure, more or less, and that you don't see. IP address, where URL, where you go, and so forth. And this is this data are kept by your access provider, websites which you go in, and so forth. And you think that they are not personal data because there is only an IP address, except that as long as your access provider keeps the link between the IP address he gave you to his consumer, his client, his user, and the time, as long as he keeps this data, what we call traffic data, the connection with you is possible. Not normally, but if the police ask something, they can make the link between the data collected at the website and the data which are still at your access provider. So it means that there is today with internet a huge challenge, which is, and it is a data protection challenge because it goes under a principle of data protection that you should not keep data more than for the purpose, the legitimate purpose. And I don't see exactly why access provider will keep all the traffic you made from his infrastructure, because you don't pay by act, you pay once a month for global, so the detail don't care. And the website you are dealing with, you are just looking at information. Why does he need to keep information? So how to apply this rule of keeping the data only the period necessary for a purpose? It seems that once you finished the session, no need to keep the data. Okay, so basically, they should not keep any data. Okay, we know that the infrastructure is wonderful, but full of holes, very easy to attack and everything. And so everybody is keeping at least data for security of their own, the security of the website, the security of the infrastructure. And they keep data. And when you look, it seems to be a legitimate purpose to trace, and if suddenly something happened, really, you can track and see where it comes from by the IP address and so forth, and who is, and all these things. The evaluation, I don't talk here from the Council of Europe. There is no recommendation on this typical, very specific topic. But from the experience I have in a data protection authority for years and years, when we made the study of that, it was clear that there is no need to keep those information more than 1 or 2 months for security. To track if one day something happened, you can keep and see, trace back where the problem came, virus and all these things. So it could be accepted that, socially, that it is 2 months. When you look at a certain decision of the European Commission, the European Union, decision on retention, it was in 2000, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact, it was some years, not that long. But, it was in a period already with terrorism and so forth. The decision at that time was not under co-decision with the Parliament. It was a decision from the Council of Ministers only. Now it would be under co-decision from Parliament, European Parliament. And they decided, yes, and it was under Spanish presidency, just after a terrible accident they had, people who were killed in a railroad station and everything. So, they decided that up to the member states, according to their procedures, if there is a problem, to look at where come from the problem. It's, it takes time, you have different procedures, police, So it had been decided that the member state could keep the data the access provider the access provider would have to keep the data from 6 months to 24 months. So at least 6 months, and up to the member states to decide according to their local convenience. In France, it's 1 year. In Germany, it's 6 months. In many countries, it's 24 months. And so afterwards, many complaints to Supreme Court had to say that this decision from the EU was not constitutional, against many things, freedom of expression and everything. And so the EC is in charge of revising, making an assessment of what happened with this, and revise and propose another text. And it was supposed to be done in 2012. And it's still not proposed. 6 months ago, they were saying that they will shorten the period. They will make proposals for having control on how those data had been used by police and so forth, because there had been a study and the situation is completely different. There is one member state in which they have, over 2 million of access to those data. 2 million, asking data about 2 million users. That's a lot. In some other, even big member states, only 3 or 4 thousand. So what's the matter? What's going on? Nobody understands what's going on. So this is not solved at all. What I can say that it is that the DPAs, after the study they made, the data protection authorities, they said no more than 3 months. And it is between 1 and 3. So I guess in Ukraine you may have this discussion also. True that police, with the number of telephone, and the telephone number is also important under certain circumstances to have access to wiretape and everything. But with this digital infrastructure now, you can track. It's true. You can track everybody for everything. And if you, even if you don't have the name of the person, and there had been an experiment by, it was the T-Online, an American service. They gave to the police a file of a person of all the requests on the search engine. And all the friends of that person could know who it was. If you put that on a screen, of course, the world would know, the 6 billions we are would know. But if the friends look at the screen, the friends of this person, they could say, oh, I know who he is, because, you know, if when you access to Google and things like that, it's all about your sphere of interests, what you are interested in. And on 2 or 3 days, you can recognize who is interested by a specific medical thing because the mother has a problem, looking at data protection all the day from Paris. That's me. No, I mean, with 4 or 5 distinguished information, location, job, age, and another data like this, you can say who he is. The statisticians know very well this kind of how to make anonymized information. So really, with this infrastructure with which you can leave traces everywhere, the real pertinent question is how long do we keep those data? And that is political matter and decisions. Data protection authority can give orientations. If everybody agrees and the practice follows this retention period, that's fine. If it's not, there is a need for arbitration, for balance made by the parliament. And it's in all the countries today the question. With Google, it's terrible also because it's question of freedom of information. If you go in a library and look at all the books, nobody knows what you had been reading. If you buy newspapers or books in a library, well, only the person to whom you pay will see what you bought, but no one else will know what, and there will be no traces of that. So it's terrible because the DPA in Europe asked all the search engine not to keep the data more than 6 months. I should have said less, but they decided this. And Google is keeping them 13 months. When the DPA said 6 months, Yahoo said, okay, we do only 3 months. You know, competition and the privacy. Now that's interesting. Huh? But the thing is still not completely solved. They may have, Google may have very good reasons to keep the data because they say that they improve the way that they react to you and so forth. Nobody knows how they do, and there is some information about the way it is done, but in concrete, no. And what is worse is that Google could took off information, huh? And you want access to it. For the moment, all the search engines are private. The most important are under a certain law. What could be off for the moment will be only under the decision of the American law. And under freedom of information, there is no complete consensus worldwide. Huh? There are nations, and that is why Internet is more or less getting separate. Huh? China, Russia is doing the same, as I understand for the moment. Some others could do it. You can have your own internet and disconnecting from others. Huh? Especially, in my view, because of that, because of the limits, the freedom of expression and its limits, which are very different. For instance, in Europe, it is forbidden to talk about the fact that it is not true that Jewish had been killed during World War II. Negativism. Negativism is a penal thing, penal act. Well, you have websites completely talking about negativism, and they are based in United States because there it's legal. So this is the most, in my view, for the moment, it is the most difficult question because there is no harmonization on the limits of freedom of expression. It is the most difficult area. And the privacy, more or less, yes, with the limits of the freedom of expression. In the United States, UK, you can talk about all the private life of politicians in details, no problem. I can tell you that in France, no, there are some limits. So even under privacy issues of what you can publish, there are differences. So that's the question. We have a marvelous infrastructure, and behind those who thought about this infrastructure, in my view, and as I know some of them, they were very democrat people, very libertarian, you know, all this peer-to-peer architecture. No one in the middle, no big platform, big data as they had been pushed. There is this tension within internet between the communities of people collaborating and making things nice for nice people on the level of world, and on the other side, merchant. And there is a tension, and sometimes they work together. Open source software are used also by Google. I saw only one day, after a certain problem had been raised, that the community of software, of open source software said, oh, maybe we should stop to work with those. But they continued. So that's the history. We have to understand in which history. And there is nothing much written, you know, and politicians don't know this dynamic of the history. Nevertheless, even if this infrastructure had been brought up by very freedom people living freedom a lot, in practice it's a terrible infrastructure because you leave trace everywhere. You cannot access anonymously a website. There is no reason under data protection principles that to access to an information you have to leave trace. No guarantee. I'm French, I'm sorry. We are not always very well in France. But we did something well before. It was Minitel. Maybe you heard, the oldest of you. We made the first infrastructure before internet, which could give exactly the same functions, but with no pictures and everything. You know, it was slower. It was I mean, previous. But you could access to it was very interesting. You could access to a server with technical guarantee of anonymity, and the server was paid for the communication, and you would pay also. I could explain to you technically how it works. I'm not accustomed to talk about that in English, but I could try afterwards if you want. And it was interesting because you would identify yourself in that case, in that infrastructure, only when it was needed. Only when it was needed. Because it's an information will come on the communication would have been established without knowing which number was calling, which person was calling. But in the communication, you could after give information if needed. And even if you wanted to have an authentication, you could use a smart card. The Minitel was a screen, a small device, half of your thing. I still have one. And there was in font. Who speaks French? I mean, you could put in a smart card. For instance, to pay with an identification and authentication process with a smart card. Oh, also, I could explain that. Never mind. So, it was anonymous access, and when needed, you could put your name, and if authentication was needed, you could put a smart card. That was smart. Well, it's all over. Internet. We don't speak of anything else than internet now, and it's true that we have a huge, huge problem with this interface. But I see that there are services which try to work on another basis than those who want to make money. For instance, you have Facebook, but even in US, you have another service for exactly the same functions, which is called diaspora, and in which the personal data are not used against you. If they want to develop a new service, they will ask you, do you want to access to this service? In this case, you give your not like the others are doing. Same for search engine. There is the name is not coming here, but I can send it to you if you want. There is one search engine. It's easy. It's a filter. It's a, I quote, function of search engine. You get to that service. He will search for you through all the other search engine and will send you back the answers to all the requests you made and won't keep any data. Of course, it's a service which works without money. I mean, it's like charities, because in the community of internet, some are thinking that we can't go on like this. So I would say the data protection laws and data protection authorities which work for the moment deals with merchants. I mean, those who make profit out of our personal data. They don't promote much the others which are not making profit with the personal data, and it is a strange situation. So this round table was on security, and I started with the traces question, which is also a question of security of myself. Do I surf on the internet safely? Am I safe, me? Okay. Now, of course, there are a lot of people, a lot of problems of security in the sense of, I always use the word CIA. I don't know how it comes in Ukrainian. Is it like in English, CIA? Confidentiality, integrity, and authentication. CIA. Okay? Well, in architecture, from a data protection girl like me, you know, it's interesting to have this kind of words, you know. I love CIA people, of course, they're very interesting. Very interesting people, they know a lot of things. So, in distance architecture, when you are long distance, it's true that it is a situation in which many things can happen. All the architecture has to be seen. Where is the lowest level of security, because that's where the problem will come. If you use software with backdoors, you're bad. That's why all big enterprise, multinationals, and governments are using Linux and not Yeah, I guess in your country also. In Germany, they loudly, the government said loudly 15 years ago, they say all the administration in their les appels d'offres. Sorry, my French words. When they ask to buy things, and we will say open source. That's all, because here is the security. Yes, because those software are made with everybody looking at it. Where is the hole? Where is the hole? Microsoft and the others, you don't know if there is no backdoor. In France, it's only 2 weeks ago that it had been loudly said by the government. Of course, in practice, they were buying only Linux stuff to manage their governmental systems. But it was not publicly a policy, if you see what I mean. Now it is publicly a policy. So I hope for you, for the heart of your systems, you will follow this kind of policy. Who access to what information? This is crucial under data protection. If you have a policy for having medical records shared by different medical professions, it is most important to have a most security on who put the data, authentication absolutely, and who access. It's terrible. Here you have really to have, I look at COSAC, you must know all these rules, but in practice, data protection authorities sometimes see that in some departments, even public or private, they didn't make the study and the assessment, where are the problems and where to put the security. So it is also, normally it's the job of professionals, because there are many, many different professional competence under the security matter. Cryptology is not the same thing than access with passwords. It's two different things. It's not the same people. So normally it's professional, but when it is not in practice, the data protection authority has to see it at the time. Well, I think that's the whole thing I could say. You can be bothered by my Franglish, as I say. If you have questions, I can. Anyway, just for the information, if I am here, it's because next week we have a set of seminars, one with telecom and IT, one with NGOs, one with on archives problems, one with media. I don't know how we could do it on Monday, because I understand that all the journalists will be outside rooms on Monday, as I understand, but we will see how we work. So I'm very happy, and what I learned 2 days ago is that the amendments to the data protection law will be adopted next week. We made a report on your law. We said from the amendments from the Minister of Justice what was going in good sense, but not completely well, and so we said everything, and we hope that we had a discussion with the Parliament on the September 12th, so we hope that you will have a good law with an independent data protection authority, which could give good advice about the most problem you said, the data retention period in the internet. Thank you.